Hello everyone and welcome to our file transfer tutorial. In the tutorial, I will show you how to transfer files from Magnus, or you can do it for any Pawsey system, to your local machine, and also how to do it from your local machine back to a Pawsey system. And the first approach is using FileZilla, which is a desktop application, and you can download it from filezillaproject.org. You can also find a link in the description. And you need the FileZilla client. So if you don't have FileZilla installed yet, I would prompt you to download the FileZilla client and resume the video once it's downloaded. Once you downloaded FileZilla, you can start up the application, and you will see that you should see a similar screen to mine. The left box here is your local machine, and the one which is grayed out so far is your local machine. So now we want to connect to our remote site, which we do by clicking on File and Site Manager. And we want to create a new site, which will connect us to Magnus. So magnus.pawsey.org.au. And we're not using FTP, but I personally favor using SFTP just because it's a more secure transfer protocol. And the default port for SFTP is port 22. In case you want to use FTP, keep in mind that the default port for FTP is 21. So you would type a 21 in the port field. Then you have to fill in your username, and you can click, and you can also rename it for Magnus 2. And let's connect. And now you can see all the file structure from our Magnus machine. I'm also logged into Magnus, and I'm in my group folder. So if you're not on Magnus yet, log on to Magnus and then type cd $my group to navigate to the my group folder. And I will create a new directory called file transfer. And let's also create a few files in this directory. And that's the files we want to transfer. So I'll just create a file 1, 2, 5. So now we have a file transfer directory with 5 empty files in it. And I will copy the path to this directory here into my remote site. And now I can access all these files. And as a local file, I want to use this folder. So I'm just copying my local path. And if I would want to transfer file 1 into my file transfer folder I defined, I just double click on file 1. And you can see that file 1 got copied to my local machine. FileZilla also has 2 further features that go beyond copying individual files. One of the features is when I create a directory in my local machine, which is also called file transfer, so it has the exact same name as on my Pawsey system. And when I stop the connection and go to Site Manager and Magnus 2 and to Advanced Settings, I can synchronize those two folders, or at least I can enable synchronized browsing. For that, I will define this folder, File Transfer, as my local directory, and my remote directory path will be this path of my file transfer folder, so same name but on Pawsey. And we want to use synchronized browsing, which means wherever I go in my remote window here, it automatically jumps in the same folder here on my local site. And directory comparison means that it shows me which directories are different, or which files in a directory are different on the local side compared to the remote side. Sadly, you can't do proper synchronization because that's only possible with FileZilla Pro. But we can see now that we have file transfer here, and it automatically jumped into our file transfer folder on our local site. And if we would create a subdirectory, a subdirectory in our in our remote folder, let's make a make directory subdirectory. So now we have a subdirectory here. And if I refresh and I navigate to the subdirectory, it automatically tries to navigate into my directory called subdir in my local machine. And it notices that it doesn't exist. So it gives me the prompt to create the missing local directory, which we will do. And you'll see now it automatically jumped into the local directory in both. And now let's go back to file transfer. If I would transfer file 1, now one file has been transferred, but you can't just click transferring them all. But you can only do it manually, but you can still use it to compare. But I personally mainly use FileZilla if I transfer individual files because it's not optimal for synchronization. There is another application you can use for synchronization though. I like to compare, it's only command line based, and I like to compare it a bit to GitHub, because you use the command is called Rsync, so Rsync, and it is used to, you can pull and push. When I run the command from my local, so the right part of my screen is my local command line, it accesses my local file system, and the left side of my screen, as you can see, Magnus, is logged into Magnus. And when I'm on my local machine on the right side and I use the pull version of the command, then I pull all the information from the remote machine to my local one. And when I use push, I push all the changes from my local machine to my remote machine. And let's get started. So let's delete the file transfer folder with remove recursively file transfer. So now we don't have a file transfer folder here, but if we list our directories, we do have a file transfer folder in our remote directory. So we want to pull the whole file transfer folder with all the subdirectories and files from to our local machine. And rsync is similar to other Linux commands that you have rsync, then you define your flags, and then you have your source, which is for us the remote server, and then you have our destination. So I type the rsync with the most basic execution is flag A for archive, and then I define my remote server, which is my username at magnus.com. pawsey.org.au, and then I want to define the path to my file, which would be the path to my group file and then file transfer. So I just copy this and then file transfer, and I want to just copy it to my local path. And because I deleted the whole file transfer file beforehand, now I want to copy the whole file. If I would only want to copy the content of file transfer into a pre-existing file, I would put a trailing slash here. But we want to copy the whole directory, so we type it that way. And I click enter. And now if I have a look, I have a file transfer folder. And if I look at the content of my file transfer folder, I can see that it has all the 5 files and a subdirectory, which I created on my remote machine. You can see that it wasn't very intuitive when you downloaded it because it doesn't show anything. So you can fix that by using a few flags. Let's update our file transfer folder on the remote machine by creating a few more files. Let's create touch file 6 to 8. Now we have a few extra files which are not on our local machine. So now we have to adjust our command. We have now already created the file transfer folder on our local machine. So we want to write to our pre-existing folder. And we don't want to copy the whole file transfer folder again, but only update the content. So we put a trailing slash here now. And we want to get a few more information while copying, so we will adjust the flags. We keep the archive flag, but we add a Z flag to it, which zips the files, which is unnecessary in our case because the files are empty, but it's very good to reduce your bandwidth when you're having large files that you want to copy, which might be the case with your projects. Then we add the verbose to get very big information because I think they're mostly easier to read. And HP, capital P, important, for human readable process bar. So it will show us the human readable process bar of all the files transferred. And you'll see how this looks in a second. So now you can see that it actually shows what is happening, not like before. It says receiving incremental file list and which files were received, the size of the files, how long it took to load the files. So you're getting much more information than before. Speed up is 0 because zipping didn't really give you any speed up because the files are empty. But this would look different if you don't have a toy folder like here, but an actual data folder. One more important point is when you delete something on your remote machine and you want to synchronize. Let's say we want to remove our subdirectory. So we don't have it on our remote machine anymore. If I would run the rsync command from before to synchronize the deletion, let's try it. You can see that nothing happened. And if I have a look in my file transfer folder, the subdirectory is still here. This is because Rsync by default copies over and updates files, but it doesn't delete files. So if we want to have that feature included, we have to specifically define it, which is done by adding -- delete. And if we run this, you can see now it deleted the subdirectory. And if we look in our file transfer folder, there is no subdirectory anymore. So if you want to not only copy and update files, but also synchronize deletes, it's important to use --delete in your command. You can do many more things, but I think that's the most important things. But if you want to have a look for yourself in your own time, you can do rsync, the manual of rsync, rsync. You'll see the manual is very long, but you can, if you scroll for a bit, for quite a while actually, eventually the flags will start. And you can have a look at all the flags that are available, like the verbose flag that we used. And if you scroll further, you can have a look through all the options. One interesting option is also the exclude one. For instance, if you want to synchronize, but you want to exclude certain files from your synchronization, you can define that with the exclude flag, which might be useful if you want to exclude some very big files from synchronization. And yeah, the rsync manual is a bit verbose, like it's very large. So to have a look at a few handy commands, you can also use too long don't read. You might have to install the command via the package manager. If you want to learn more about package managers, you can also look at that tutorial. Let's do too long don't read rsync. You'll see it looks much prettier and more succinct. And there are a few basic commands that are really useful. One more command to copy files is SCP. So safe, secure copy. I would recommend to use Rsync, but I will still show you how to copy one file with SCP. Let's say if we create one new file, 9.txt, and we want to copy it with Rsync, we would now say we want file 9.txt to be added to our local file transfer folder. And we use SCP. So now file txt is copied, and if we have a look at file transfer, we can see that now we copied file 9 to our folder. You can also use SCP with a few flags, but Rsync is far more flexible and gives you the choice to do more things and define more things. So I would recommend you to use Rsync. And if you prefer a desktop application environment, I think FileZilla is a good solution. Thank you.